Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of the Tees Valley Sport Podcast. Today I'm joined by Niall Judge. Niall is the development manager for clubs for Sport England. It's an interesting time for Sport England after having the 10-year strategy that was announced a couple of weeks ago. We get a little bit of insight into the strategy and Niall gives some really good information for clubs who might want to get a little bit more about how to deal with COVID, how to tackle the issues of new membership, how to use their volunteers. It's a great episode, one I was really excited to record and hope it won't disappoint. Enjoy. Hi, Niall, lovely to catch up with you. Can you just introduce yourself and your role at Sport England, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark, and thanks for having a conversation today. So, Niall Judge. So I'm development manager for clubs at Sport England. So I've been here for a couple of years now, and kind of look after some of our strategic relationship on club development, along with my line manager. But keenly, I kind of look after the Club Matters program, which is our big, huge resource program and support network that we offer for clubs and community groups. And then as well as that, I have a kind of real connection to active partnerships. So working across all 42 partnerships, really looking at workforce development.
Awesome. So just a bit of background on yourself then, Niall. What's your personal background in sport and physical activity? Do you get involved in much sport? Do you tell people about yourself a little bit?
Yeah, so I would probably say I'm a retired sportsman now. I mean, I'm only 30, but I am a retired sportsman in that I don't formally do sport as I used to, but obviously when I was younger, very keen gymnast, footballer, and athletics. And athletics is kind of what I carried on to into my kind of up until into my 20s, and very much now a recreational cyclist, a Zwifter for those who use turbos, and just a runner. But in terms of kind of my career and sport's always been a thing for me. I've always been involved in sport in some way. And I was 16 when someone said, "Oh, do you want to do a football level 1?" And I got to do that through my sixth form for free. And I think that's what first probably started my love affair with coaching. And then kind of stuck with coaching into university. So I did a degree in sports coaching. And then kind of did a master's as well in sports coaching. And I think for me, that was just a great opportunity to understand the kind of ins and outs of what's possible, and what does the sports world look like. So then, I spent a couple of years lecturing at university as well following that. So some of my experiences, able to kind of give that back through university lecturing. And then I always like to say to people, I moved into and this is no disrespect to universities, but I kind of felt I needed to get into the real world and get into kind of what was community sport really like. So that's when I joined an active partnership. I went to Active Gloucestershire, which is a long way from Tees Valley. I won't lie to you. But popped down. So I worked there for about 4.5 years in a couple of roles. Started as a kind of coach and development officer, and then kind of worked my way up to become kind of head of sport and then head of business development at the partnership, which was fantastic. And I learned an incredible amount of things at working at community level, understanding what's important, understanding all the differences, which kind of really prepared me for this role to move to Sport England, to become a development manager for clubs, and kind of just looking at how we do things. The other thing as well is, alongside this, I've always been a volunteer.
Awesome.
I've always been a volunteer coach. I've got a bit of a thing where a lot of people gave up their time for me when I was younger, and I really believe in being a volunteer. So I'm an athletics coach, and I've been a coach for, probably about 10 years now, working with loads of different athletes, lots of different levels. And I just love it. I think for me, it's really important to be part of a club and to give my time up. And I'm also, trying to give back as well. I'm a tutor for England athletics. So I'm combining my love of coaching, my love of club development, and my love of kind of sort of teaching or lecturing as well, all in one go. So yeah, sport is quite a major part of my life. You might learn to guess, and kind of, I've gone lots of different ways to get where we are now.
It's interesting that, because when I was at college, I did a work experience I think it was my second year at college at Levine, and I did a work experience placement at Darlington, what was then the sports development team. And I did it. It was only a week. I was with actually ended up being my boss at the time. So I did a week's placement, and that ended up changing my direction in life. I was really keen on journalism, and I really wanted to be a journalist. And I did 1 week working in sport, and it just completely changed my direction in life. And from that, I ended up doing a sports element degree. And since then, I actually went back and I got a full-time job working where I did my 1 week placement. So I always, while my boss up at the time, I always say to him, you're the reason I'm here. Like, and it was incredible that he was my placement supervisor and then became my boss. So it's amazing how life can really chuck that full circle at you.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, when I've done career talks in the past and stuff, I said, look, someone gave me a chance when I was 16, and I thought, you know what, let's have a go. And it's kind of dictated the rest of my career. I also tell people I was lucky. I think you can never being in the right place at the right time. For you got the right type of placement at the right time that spurred you on. And I can count on my hand where I've been lucky through the years to be in the right place at the right time. And you do that by making sure that you're nice to people and you get on with people and you take your opportunities. So yeah, I completely I completely see the connection into that as well.
Yeah, 100%. So this year's been a year simply like no other. Obviously with COVID, and as I keep saying to people, this is coming up to my 11th month anniversary of working at home. So obviously, we've had to change our roles within Tees Valley Sport. So in terms of your role within Sport England, what changes and impacts has COVID had on you and your role?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I might end up saying that quite a few times today. And it's no credit, it's all credit to you, Mark, in terms of the questions you've got. No, it's a really interesting role. And the first thing I kind of thought about with that is actually, it's not been different, but it's been different. So in terms of the kind of our objectives around sport and activity, it's always the same. Make sure people can play sport, can access physical activity, look at their connections. But I think we're looking at that in a much different way. And it's been much busier. So for us at Sport England, particularly when COVID kind of hit, first of all, it was to hunker down and think, right, what is the most important things right now? What have we got to do? What's our responsibility to help people? And this is the general public, our partners, everyone we fund, everyone we support. What have we got to do? And I think for us, the key things were twofold. It was, okay, well, let's deal with these issues through supporting the sector. So thinking about what does the sector need? What do people in the sector need? And in a lot of ways, in that first instance, it was to know what they can and can't do, but also that funding. They needed the help, and we funded almost £30 million in our community emergency fund, and you've also got the secure in the future some partners as well. So again, we committed something like £130 million to partners for another year as we go now. So overall, our funding over that time was about 220 million. But it wasn't just about funding. It wasn't just about let's just make sure people can carry on. It was a big part. We also needed to keep people active and inspire people to be active. So keeping the nation active was a really key thing for us. And the Join the Movement campaign that we kind of launched quite quickly, I think it was around April, May last year. It was about, we can still be active through lockdown. We can still do lots of things. And the messages are still true now. It's just a bit colder. So it's a little bit more difficult to do. So I think that was our kind of first gut reaction, is let's do what we can. And then it very quickly kind of moved into, okay, so how then do we help people get back to activity? How do we help clubs? How do we help volunteers and coaches? How do we help those community organizations where sport isn't the main driver, but sport's a major thing of what they do? So the return to play agenda come to the fore quite quickly. And it was about ensuring we've got the right advice, ensuring that people know what they need to do to come back, ensuring that people are following the government guidelines and what that means for different sports and activities. And I think actually what it did was shine a lens on clubs through this time. And actually, first of all, there was the immediacy of, oh my God, clubs are in a lot of problems here. And the workforce has got a lot of challenges here. It very quickly moved to clubs are doing a lot for their community. There are countless videos, countless examples of people in clubs stepping up to deliver food, to look after vulnerable individuals, to fundraising and all sorts of stuff. And suddenly it was a lot to do, as well as the day jobs of clubs in terms of connecting with members, running Zoom quizzes. I think we're probably all Zoom quizzed out a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're getting there now, aren't we?
But there was all of that stuff, you know, keeping in touch with members, keeping in touch with volunteers becomes so important. So for us in Sport England, it was definitely an adaptation. It was, and I've put down here, work fast but work together. We needed to get things done, but we also needed to work internally together, but we needed to work with our partners. What do people need us to do? So it's been a challenging year all round for everybody, and we've had to work really quite hard. But I think what we've then been able to do is to support as many people as we can, and we know that the job isn't done. The job will continue. We've got potentially more return to play work coming up, hopefully in March, April time, as we get back to activity, and then, you know, whatever the normal looks like in 6, 9, 12 months time. So this is going to continue. I don't mean that to sound horrendous, but it's more, our role doesn't end now. Our role kind of continues, and we keep working forward.
Awesome. So I guess it must be quite an exciting time as well, working at Sport England with the 10-year strategy that was announced. I mean, do you see that having much of an impact in terms of your role? Obviously, with the new strategy changes, will that have an impact on yourself, or do you think that it'll be same old?
Yeah, it is a super exciting time. You know, the Uniting the Movement 10-year strategy, it's a blueprint to say we've got a longer time span. We've got a lot to do. There's a lot of connectivity between health, sport, physical activities that can happen. For me, and particularly for clubs, I think, like I said earlier, COVID has placed a real spotlight on clubs, and actually the connecting community. So I think it gives us license to continue to think, well, what does this mean in the future? There's a real strong sense of kind of localism from the new strategy in terms of actually, in order for things to happen and to make a difference and to tackle inequalities or to support communities, this has to be done at a local place. This has to be done at a local feel. And when you look across a place, you see clubs everywhere. You see community groups. You see people who operate on a pitch or in a community hall. And these are all groups and clubs that may deliver physical activity and sport differently, but have similar purposes as what they're trying to do. So there's a real opportunity going forward to kind of explore this at a local level and kind of challenge what it is that we can do to continue to support clubs and volunteers, but also in terms of what our role with partners is. And I think that the best thing I've kind of seen at the moment is sport has a role to play in a lot of this, and you know, sport in what organised sport amongst everything, because it's that connection between sport, physical activity and health that can't work in silos. They actually work really well together and interchangeably. So I think for clubs, you can look across that spectrum and think, well, what's the club's role in sport, physical activity and health? And how do we help that really knit together? And not to get too boring and wordy, but we talk about ecosystems at a local level. And to say that, you know, well, only sports clubs are in this area, actually, there's loads of different groups. And in a lot of ways, we need that interaction between those groups to really benefit kind of sport and activity at that level. So yeah, lots and lots of potential off the strategy. Lots of work to do, but in some ways we need to just take that time just to pause and go, right, hold on. We need to do a bit of planning. And I think that's what we're going to spend the next kind of 6 months to up until sort of September 2021 is to do that planning with partners, with people out there, with clubs to understand what they would expect of us, to kind of really help diagnose where we go for the next couple of years.
I think what you're saying there is right, though, isn't it? We've got to listen to the people at the driving force, but the clubs are the drivers, and if we need to be listening and engaging and reacting to what they want and what their needs are. I think you've hit the nail on the head there completely.
And yeah, so one of the cornerstones of our strategy is about collaboration. It's one of our values. We need to collaborate and we need to listen and we need to think about inclusivity, but we need to listen directly to the people who are doing this. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit later in terms of some of the things clubs think about, but clubs are busy. Volunteers are really busy. And we know that in COVID, the numbers who are at clubs is going to be affected. So we need to understand that fully on the ground and then think about the role we need to play, the role active partnerships, but also a range of other organisations can play in that.
Yeah, awesome. So obviously the strategy's seen a real shift to the health and wellbeing focus. Was this always going to be the main priorities, or is the COVID 2020, has that kind of seen a bit of a shift?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a shift, if I'm honest, in terms of, it's a gut reaction to go, we need to do that. I think exploring health and well-being was a core part of our previous strategy, and understanding the landscape and what is that connectivity. So I think this is more a bit of an evolution of kind of what do we do with health and well-being. The lens on physical activity has actually not been stronger. It gives us a real license right now, and this has become because of COVID. Physical activity, exercise is currently, it's top of the list. It's one of the very few things that we can do right now. It's the work that was going on last year to talk about, you need to be physically active so that if you do catch COVID, that you're much likely better, to tackle it because you're physically healthy, and bits and pieces like that. So that license at a national, but also at a local level, is there for physical activity to connect into health. So yeah, I absolutely think it's an evolution. It always would be there around health and well-being. I think as well, the inequalities we see in sport, so the people who find it more difficult to access sporting opportunities for a variety of reasons, it's the same as the inequalities we see in society. So there's a natural connection there in terms of, well, we're not fighting against each other here. We should absolutely be working together and to unlock this. But I do say that as the big we, because it can't just be Sport England doing
Absolutely
this.
not.
It's kind of, our role sometimes is to lead, but our role sometimes is to be that convener or a connector. And there are other people who are better placed to do this. The reason that active partnerships are great in terms of on the ground is because you have that local knowledge of place and connection. So you're much, much better placed to tackle those things on the ground, whereas we have those different conversations. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I would kind of lead things in health and well-being. And it links back to me answering my previous question, is that we can't look at health and well-being over here and sport here and physical activity here. It's that connection between all of them that's really critical.
Yeah, so obviously for Tees Valley Sport being one of the active partnerships, for us it's a very exciting time with a new strategy. We've got a new exec director, so we're obviously spending this time as well to kind of take stock and have a little reevaluate of where we are. So from your perspective, what would you say our priorities would be, and where would you say active partnerships? This is what we would be thinking. This is anything you can talk around there.
Yeah. There's always a cop-out answer to that, and I'm going to give you the cop-out answer in terms of saying it's where you need to go as a localized thing. We'll never tell you what you kind of need to do, but there are some themes, isn't there, that we've already started talking about, and the themes that kind of come through to me are communities, health, and place. Are really strong themes in our strategy. And I think there are already really strong themes, if I'm honest, in kind of your thinking, the way you do things, and what we see other active partnerships do. So those are the kind of core things that come through. I always then like to think about I'll call them accelerators. We call them catalysts for change, or you might call them things like enablers. But for them, these are the things that underpin maybe those core themes or core areas. And these are things that can probably really make the difference. So focuses around people. And you can think as broad as people as you like, from thinking about volunteers and coaches all the way to thinking about families or receptionists in leisure centres who have the power to have great conversations around physical activity. So you've got people, things like digital, as we've all become very used to use. Insight is always really important. Insight and research, we can't ever underestimate the value of understanding the place. And then networks, I think what you guys do brilliantly is bring people together, convene conversations, and get people working and moving together. And those kind of four things really, I think, would help some of those broad themes and broad priorities. So, yeah, I think we will explore the kind of what's the role of the active partnerships, but from a local level in terms of what's important, I think that community's health and place is clearly coming through as important things.
Absolutely, that's great to hear from us, giving us a bit of encouragement and help there as well. But if we go back to having a little think around the club side of things, if you were to give some clubs some support moving forward, obviously a lot of clubs would probably have been traditional sports coaching side of things. We will get sports coaches, we will get people that can do level 1, level 2, and so on. In terms of emerging areas that clubs might want to address, is there anything which you think, the current climate, current COVID situation, anything that clubs might want to have a little tackle and a little bit of take stock, maybe as a reevaluate?
God, yes. I think there is. Whenever I kind of get asked this question around what's the top topic to go and develop, and I always think, well, there's sometimes a gut reaction is we just go on to courses or just put people onto training for development's sake. So what we want to technically avoid is development for development's sake. And I think
absolutely.
What we've got from COVID is an opportunity to kind of step back and think, well, hold on, what's the right approach here? So for me, the main thing would be around thinking around inclusion and just in terms of what that means, it's about inclusiveness. So it's not about particular audiences or people or anything like that. It's about understanding how as a club are we inclusive in terms of, is this the right offer for people? Are they getting what they kind of need? Is this the best thing for them? And in the past, people have felt, well, I need to go find out specific information about this demographic or these type of people to understand inclusion. But when we talk about inclusive practice, if we take a bit more of a holistic view around, actually, it's just an approach to everything we do, then actually it provides that kind of better experience. And inclusion doesn't also mean, and it doesn't always mean, let's bring more people in. I need to bring more people in. Actually, sometimes it starts with, let's just look at ourselves. Let's think about, as a club or as a group, are we as inclusive as possible for the people who come here? So, what's the kind of culture we set in our club? What's the kind of the culture we set with our volunteers? Do we value them enough? And then it gets down to things like, are we providing the right kind of offer to individuals? Is it right for everybody? If not, how can we start to shift that a little bit, change that a little bit, try some new things? We've got license off the back of COVID to try new things where possible. And actually that might encourage some people to come back who might be a bit more fearful to come back if there's something different to come back to, or the same to come back to. It's those things. So I'd say, in terms of developing the workforce, in terms of that bit, starting to think around that kind of inclusive bit. And in terms of just, if there is things that are particularly in the spotlight, I would say mental well-being is within the spotlight, mental health. We know that, and this is from some work we did last year in our return to play survey, is that one of the key concerns people have got coming back is anxiety around health and safety, anxiety around kind of getting near people and bits and pieces like that. But also, particularly in this lockdown, it's the anxiety of another lockdown. It's grim, cold and wet. So some of the stuff in terms of just, how to have a conversation with someone around their mental well-being is super powerful. Just having a bit of contact with them is really key. So I would say that they're the two kind of things to me, is think about inclusion, think about your club and what it's doing at the moment before thinking, right, let's try and get even more people in from lots of areas. And certainly that mental well-being bit is a big bit. And I know you've done a podcast as well with Mind as well on mental well-being.
Yeah, it's really interesting that the mental health aspect of things, it keeps cropping up in conversation I'm having on these podcast episodes, in conversations with people from the team, with friends, with family. I think the mental health side is something that, as you say, this lockdown in particular, I think because, we've nearly been a year where we've had lockdown out of lockdown, lockdown out of lockdown. I think this lockdown in particular, with the weather, with the snow, I was saying to you before we jumped on this recording, I've had to shut the curtains today because I'm actually getting blinded by the sun, whereas last week it was blinded by the snow. It's people's mental, I think people are struggling more this time around because of the cold factor. You're working full time, and then last year when it was the lockdown, you could go out for a lovely walk in the evening because it was still 18, 19 degrees with sunshine. I mean, you finish work now 5:30, and it's dark. And I think that's something that, certainly from my conversation, I'm sure you're having very similar conversations, that people seem to be struggling a lot more this time around.
Yeah, absolutely. And the connection to clubs and groups as well is challenging this time, because we were all hopeful of getting back and doing sports in our clubs. And actually one of the reasons a lot of people go to clubs and groups is that social aspect.
Absolutely.
That connection with other people. So that kind of feeling of connection has been really important. And for clubs to be able to continue to do that through this phase, again, it's had to go back to being virtual.
Yeah.
But we talked earlier on about this kind of virtual fatigue that people will be feeling, particularly if you're working from home at the same time, or you're doing homeschooling with children and stuff. So that's where the key thing will be going forward, is that kind of check-in as we go, because it might take people quite a long time to come back. You know, as lifetime settles down, that kind of checking in is going to be really important.
Absolutely.
Some of that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about clubs and looking and what they can do to kind of moving forward. And a question which a good one to ask you is, are there any good examples kind of nationally in terms of how clubs have managed to recruit and retain volunteers? And, you know, some second part of the question, obviously, I know you said that the membership isn't as priority, but any good examples of what nationally people have been using to recruit new members, maybe that can juniors, adults?
Yeah, so there's two really good questions there. So I think just on the volunteers, in terms of recruitment and retention, there's a couple of things that stick out for me. England Golf did a really interesting piece around buddies, which some clubs have picked up, where it's to kind of volunteer to become a buddy. So rather than volunteer to be on the committee or to do with the money and stuff, it's actually volunteer to be a buddy, to just, you know, perhaps play around with someone every now and again, or when someone new comes to the club, actually you just spend half an hour with them, orientating them to the club, or someone who's just looking for someone to go and shoot 3 holes, or to just someone to chat to on the driving range. You can kind of connect people up. And the buddies thing, you know, buddies we've seen around before, but it was more than just someone to be active with. It's not someone to go for a run with, it's someone probably to have a conversation with. And I think that's really important more than ever. So it was a different type of volunteering, because you are volunteering, if you want to give it a label, but you're not volunteering. So it's
a good
micro.
Nice use of a person, that, isn't it? It's a nice use of people's time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the kind of micro thing to go, well, actually, you might be a buddy for 3 people this week, and then might not do it again for 2 weeks. And that flexibility in volunteering is so key, because people have busy lives now, and we know that the model of volunteering and taking on a role for 2-3 years, it is a tough one to get started on. And particularly when we're looking at, you know, the next generation of volunteers come through, we're much more aware that it needs to be shorter, sharper, flexible opportunities. And I think that kind of gives you an example. And there's another nice example linked to that, actually, to do with committees, which I know that, you know, recruiting people onto committees can be quite difficult, as we've seen with Handforth Parish Council. Anyone who wants to volunteer to go on that committee. But it's to say that actually a committee doesn't need to do everything. A committee doesn't need to make all the decisions. Is you can have steering groups. So, for example, you could have a steering group around young people, or a steering group around volunteer or coach development, or whatever it might be, because you then start to engage people in the club who would go, well, I don't want to give my time up to be a committee member, but I'll pop along to something for half an hour every month where we're just having a bit of a discussion around that. And so I think that's more powerful, the kind of recruitment from within and retention of volunteers, because you know, you've got people in the club who are then making the decisions, who are making extended people in the club, making decisions, and you've got more people engaged then. And I think that's a really nice way to start to think, how can we help the club feel more involved? How can we help the club more people volunteer, but not feel they need to volunteer, you know, many hours a week? And actually, in some ways, can take the pressure off a committee as well to do all that work. So the biggest thing we always say around volunteers and clubs, and we've heard this, is we've got to try and reduce we've got to increase the capacity for volunteers, because volunteers work really hard on lots and lots of things, but we need to somehow help them, you know, not have to work on all of these different bits and pieces. So this micro volunteering is a really interesting way to do that.
No, definitely, that's something that's a really interesting way of clubs to work, and I definitely think that's something that, you know, a lot of clubs, not just in the northeast, anywhere really, can utilize that as a great example of a way to utilize their membership as a way to help potentially get new members in who might be a little bit nervous. If you've got somebody there that's giving up their time to almost, as you say, to buddy up with a new member, then that's a great way of welcoming somebody in, but also utilizing somebody's time efficiently.
Yeah, and the answer to your second question as well is connected into that, in terms of getting more members into the club. Obviously, a lot of clubs' priority at the moment will be getting their existing members or participants back, but there is some learning that we've got from COVID that makes us think about this. So I was talking earlier about different offers and different opportunities. We've got the license to do that now. We might need to run groups in clubs in different ways, maybe less people at the moment, maybe different opportunities, maybe meeting in different places So say, we don't need to travel 20 miles to the football pitch. Actually, can we do some, different places in different areas, which is now an opportunity. But equally, there's something around kind of that. There's another connection that people could have into your club. So we saw a lot in lockdown 1, in particular, the kind of role of virtual exercise and virtual development, and people maybe learning or doing exercise at a distance. So things like plans or virtual classes and stuff. And it's kind of, well, what if we keep both of those offers going forward? What if there's still a virtual opportunity for people who aren't quite ready to come down to the club or don't want to do that quite yet, but they stay in touch, and they might say to a friend, oh, actually, I'm doing this tonight. Do you want to kind of come along? So, let's take something like a boxing club. Boxing have really suffered because you can't do sparring, you can't do pad work at the moment, but they've been fantastic at exercise classes and lots of opportunities. And actually, well, what if we keep that going? What if there's an increased reach that we could then get into those? And eventually, when people feel more comfortable, if they've enjoyed the virtual version, you've got that. Obviously, we know that digital access is not even for everybody. So the idea around continuing to reach a broader audience is to kind of say, well, let's think about the reach to the community that we've had potentially through lockdown, or when we've seen challenges in different communities, and to invite people in at the right time. I don't think it's hard to know when that right time is going to be. And I think for clubs, let's get on a sure footing, and then it's kind of to say, well, when are we willing to do that further connection into more people?
Awesome. So you mentioned the virtual aspect of it there and the online. Would you, if a club's looking for some, obviously there's so much stuff going on at the minute, if you could give a club this is a good online tool, this is a good online resource, what would you probably suggest, what might you suggest to clubs? Maybe take a look into this. This is something that I would kind of say, there's some really good resources, some really important information.
Yeah, I mean, I would be remiss not to advocate people going to Club Matters. It is the program I kind of look after, but there is a huge amount of great resources on there to try and give you different ideas. Yes, there's stuff on the website which you can kind of look through. There's templates and toolkits you can download. But equally, if you feel like you learn in different ways, there's videos to watch, there's podcasts to listen to. Videos on what clubs have been doing through lockdown, how they've made them safe. We've got a fantastic series of videos from Peterborough Town, for example, who tell you how they changed all their facilities and what they've done to make it safe. But we've also got podcasts on kind of with different experts. So we've got a podcast on working with people with disability, thinking about LGBT inclusion within clubs and groups as well. So there's lots of different kind of mediums you can do that. I'd say outside of Club Matters, and what I would say is as well is we're working with Tees Valley locally on Club Matters Local to think about what does really effective club development look like. So I know that through yourselves on your website as well, you've got a direct link into Club Matters, but there's also further opportunities to kind of engage with Tees Valley on that. But I will just nod to a few other things because I think I don't be too biased. I would probably say Activity Alliance's Inclusive Activity Programme, which was a face-to-face course, 2-hour workshop, is now virtual. It's now online, and it's superb. And it just totally gives you some ideas around how you can practically look at being an inclusive club for any participants, which is grand. It's worth doing a nod as well to Mind's mental health awareness course that they developed in line with UK coaching. A fantastic course that just kind of, it's not about saying to you, here are different conditions that people have mental ill health with, but it's kind of, how do I have a conversation? How do I think about different things I can do in that club or with my volunteers? It's really great. And then the other thing for me, again, is a virtual course at the moment, is the unconscious bias training that UK coaching deliver. Again, it just starts to get us thinking more inclusively, thinking in different ways. And I would give that a really strong nod as well. And then the last thing on training, absolute last thing, is Club Matters do have a range of workshops which are perhaps more practically focused on things like volunteer experience, things like planning for your future, financial sustainability, and they're free workshops to attend, which you can find on the Club Matters website. So those, I would say those are the kind of formal things. There is one more thing I've got, because training is not right for everybody.
No.
And I think it's really important that looking at a screen also isn't for everybody from an accessibility or just fed up of looking at screens. So actually, one of the things that we've seen, and I think is a really great thing, is to talk to others, talk to other clubs. If you're a chairman in a club and you're listening to this, speak to another chairman in a different sport, in a different club, in a different town, or in the same town. Perhaps someone who you wouldn't normally connect to, but actually sometimes that conversation can offer a lot more than a training session can. You know, I'm in the same situation as you. How have you dealt with this? Such powerful opportunities to kind of do that. So sometimes that can be the most powerful resource to access.
Awesome. What I'll do is I'll put little links in our show notes to all of those resources you mentioned. So if people do want to find out more information about anything, then all they'll have to do is just go down the show notes on the episode and just click on the links, really. So it's nice and simple for people. But it's interesting you mentioned the Club Matters, because something we're looking to do is Tees Valley Sport, we're hoping to get some kind of Tees Valley focused ones where we can just engage with our Tees Valley clubs, because sometimes I think what people find is they like to be with other people from their areas.
Yeah.
So something which I think we're hopefully going to be releasing soon is a Tees Valley focus on the Club Matters workshops, which is something that we're quite excited about, which will hopefully give some Tees Valley clubs the chance to access the Club Matters resources, which, you know, they're really important. And, you know, I've although it's part of my role within my job, it's something that I've actually looked at the resources from my club head, and there's actually some really important stuff on there, especially around the return to play stuff, around the risk assessment side of things. It's actually helped me with my club, because I play cricket within one of the local cricket clubs, and it's really helped us. Obviously, we've taken stock during COVID, because obviously we've had a lot more time, and it's been great to use those resources. So although it's, as I said, it's part of my role, it's been nice to implement it into my own club, which has been fantastic for us and for myself as well. So we'll definitely share those show notes. Those links all go in our show notes, definitely.
Brilliant.
I guess another question to ask you, Niall, is if a club's or organisation are thinking themselves, how can I engage with children and young people? What would you say is a good starting point for them?
Yeah, it's an age-old question, that one.
It really is.
For children and young people, often the thing we say to them is speak to young people. I know sometimes it's actually quite difficult to do, but if we speak to young people, you start to understand what is the type of thing that they might want. The primary driver, believe it or not, it's not normally the sport. It's not normally, I want to come along to play football, to win a competition, to win a trophy. That's atypically not the driver for why children want to do activity. It's because potentially they want to be social, they want something to do. So in some ways, the environment you create for young people, it's more around that social environment in terms of, well, what are you coming here for? Actually, you're coming here to have fun. You're coming here to work and operate with other people, and you're going to come and kind of have a go at some activity and different bits if you're coming in for the first time. And I think that's really powerful to kind of, when you're thinking about marketing or when you're thinking about just talking to people, is that's actually front and center. Those who want to go to win and to go and play sport and to play every Sunday in a football league, there's a good chance that they're already doing that. I think it's about the culture and the environment that you promote. It is really key. If I'm thinking about something like a table tennis club. I'm not just here for table tennis. I'm here for meeting people. Yeah. I'm here to have a good time. I'm also here. I also want to know that if I don't want to come one week, that's okay. I don't need to sign up to a 12-week block. I actually might want to dip in and dip out. And you know what? That's not a problem at all. Yeah. Because once they get through that initial phase, they'll decide whether it's for them or not for them. So I think giving them that flexibility. The other thing as well is clubs that are able to do a bit more. You've always got the opportunity to. So we've seen, obviously, in the press all the work Marcus Rashford's doing around food and hunger. And actually, if your club can do something like that to go, well, we have a bar, we have something on site, we can do a little bit of food. So you come and play table tennis and you get a little bit of food at the same time. Yeah. There's added value sometimes to what that is. And it's not to say every club needs to do that. That's maybe not great health and safety advice, but it's to understand the broader role that a club can play with that community. That's not just about sport. There's a lot of clubs that do this already. So I'm not saying anything necessarily brand new, but clubs that clubs that have food bank collections, clubs that do provide that food, have holiday programs that provide all sorts of stuff as well. But at the same time, clubs that just give great experiences for young people. So yeah, I would probably say think about the broader things in the sport. Give the flexibility, and if there is anything else you can offer outside of the social and physical aspect, then what could that be? And that's not a bad thing to put in there.
I certainly think moving out of, when we do eventually get to move out of this lockdown and we can go and get back into sport, I certainly think that more people are going to want to, well, I'd like to think more people are going to want to, because a lot of people might just think, oh, I'm sick of these four walls. I want to get out and do something. So I think it is a really good opportunity for clubs to maybe get some new youngsters involved in sport who may have missed those. I mean, a lot of children have probably missed almost a year where it's, they've perhaps not had that involvement in PE, involvement in physical activity. So they might be looking for something to do. Yeah. So I think if, as you say, in that social element, as well as the physical side of things, I think it's a real opportunity for clubs to take a hold of and maybe take advantage of what has gone on this past year.
Yeah, and obviously it's not just about children. A lot of time it's the family as well. So even if you're a club who has a predominantly adults, running family days could suddenly really start a youth setting in your club, because there's connection there. Or if you are if you are a club that works for young people, or a youth centre that works for young people, bringing families is really key, because we know that parents and carers are really important to getting young people to these environments. So if they're involved, if they're engaged, you just get much better traction. And absolutely, families will be looking for things to do across the next couple of months, and particularly into the summer. We're all hoping for a bumper summer of sun, obviously.
I hope so.
But there's lots of opportunities, because people will still want to be outside. People will still want to be doing things. And so there's an opportunity for clubs to really connect with communities and families.
Absolutely. So final question from me, Niall. I've kept you for long enough. I think I've asked you enough questions here, but one more is, if you were to give clubs one piece of advice, given the current situation of COVID, moving forward, hopefully coming out of COVID, what would your advice be to a club?
Keep talking to people and your volunteers. Don't stop. Don't let up. The biggest thing we can do right now is to make sure people are okay, make sure people feel connected, and make sure people know that you're there when they're ready. And also to just say that, there's lots of ways you can keep talking to people. Yes, we can do it virtually. Yes, we can do it via social media and little updates and asking people to stuff. But sometimes one of those power things, pick up the phone up, chatting to some of your members to say, just how are you? Chat to your volunteers. Just say, look, is there anything I can do for you right now? Are you feeling? What's your thoughts around coming back? Do you want to still do volunteers? Do you still want to do it as much as it is? And spread that out. Don't just be the chairperson sitting there going, right, I've got to ring everybody in my club. Spread it out amongst the committee, spread it out amongst volunteers, spread it out amongst, your most active participants or your keen people, and just keep in touch, because the time that gets put into that now will reap its benefits when people are coming back. So yeah, keep talking, keep in touch, just talk.
Awesome. Love that. I think that's a great piece of advice. And I think what you're saying is absolutely perfect. It's keeping in touch, and it's just making sure people are okay. Sometimes it's a 2-minute call, isn't it? It's just a little check-in of how you're doing it, and that could make someone's day. A lot of people who are, they might be on their own, they could be working at home, they could be homeschooling. A phone call off a club member just saying, just checking in, how are you doing? It's sometimes people don't realise how important that is. So I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head, and I think that's an incredible piece of advice to finish up, Niall. So I'll say thank you very much for your time. It's been great chatting to you. I think you've given some great advice, some great updates from how you've been working, how you've been reacting to COVID. The last year has been a challenging year for everyone, and I think everyone working in sport has really had to adapt and to really think about new ways of working. So it's been great listening and hearing from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody.
And I'll keep in touch. I'll speak to you soon.
Yes.
What a great episode. Absolutely brilliant hearing from Niall around the strategy, around how Sport England are working from home, around how they've been dealing with this past year with the pandemic. He gives some amazing insight to clubs, some fantastic nuggets of information, which hopefully a lot of our clubs in the Tees Valley can use to really help them develop further. We hope you're enjoying this series of podcasts. So this is episode 5. We have got some amazing episodes lined up. If anyone has any feedback, please do share it with us, whether on our Facebook page or any way you want to get in contact with us. Please reach out and let us know what you think about these podcasts. If there's any episodes you'd like us to deal with, any issues, any topics of discussion, please do let us know. We are really open to people giving us their feedback. And without that, we can't really improve this. So please do speak to us, get in contact with us, and let us know what you're thinking. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.